That dress really suits you.
Sophia didn't respond to those words, instead looking slightly confused. My sister-in-law, Michelle, had for some reason handed over my daughter Zoe's dress to her own daughter, Sophia. Unable to fully grasp the situation, I remained silent.
See, doesn't it look much more adorable on Sophia?
Michelle said this with a mocking smile, then pressed the dress against Sophia's shoulders. If I were to respond here, it might lead to an argument. When I looked over at my husband, Jake, he stayed quiet, his face pale.
Wouldn't you agree that Sophia looks cuter in that dress than Zoe does? Or does Zoe think she's cuter than Sophia? Do you think you're somehow better than her?
Jake, why are you saying it like that?
I can confidently say Sophia looks way cuter. Am I thinking about this all wrong?
Michelle's tone grew more intense, as if she'd claimed a decisive victory. I wondered what I was witnessing here.
Sophia, wearing a dress is something special. If someone offers it to you, you absolutely take it. Got it?
Michelle shot a glare at Jake. Why is it he can never stand up to her? Though he's my husband, I couldn't help feeling a twinge of disappointment, and yet his next words, regardless of Michelle's pressure, were unforgivable.
Well, it's true that the dress looks better on Sophia than on Zoe, anyway.
When Jake looked down at Zoe and said that, time stopped for me. His words hit me like a cold splash of water. Zoe's small face changed to an expression filled with sadness. Thank you for everything up until now. Taking Zoe's hand, I said this flatly. She also sensed my resolve, nodded slightly, and then looked back at Jake.
Goodbye, Dad.
With that, we began preparing to leave together. As we walked out the door, Michelle's laughter echoed behind us. But Zoe and I didn't stop. We kept walking, committed to a new future, not looking back. But everything would change in just 10 minutes. My name is Kate Turner, and I'm 45 years old. I live with my husband, Jake, and our daughter, Zoe. I've always thought we had a peaceful and happy home. In our open dining kitchen with a view of the living room, I was casually preparing breakfast. My kind husband, Jake, was reading the paper, and our 8-year-old daughter, Zoe, was getting ready for the day. Just before leaving for school, she has a habit of double-checking her backpack. Aside from weekends, I also work part-time as a dressmaker. Perhaps out of consideration for my busy schedule, Zoe is an independent, easygoing child who handles things herself. Jake absolutely adores Zoe and, without being asked, braids her hair into pigtails every morning.
I wanted to be a dad who can braid hair.
Since her preschool days, he's been trying, sometimes struggling, to braid her hair before heading out for work. Now he braids her hair faster and better than I do. Through the kitchen window, I could see our small garden. On my day off last week, Zoe and I planted some bulbs for spring. They were tulip bulbs we got from a local hardware store. We just prepared the flower bed soil and planted them. Nothing more to do until spring. Still, I find myself glancing at the bare garden soil from the small kitchen window out of habit. The day we planted the bulbs, Jake's sister, Michelle, suddenly moved into our neighborhood. She moved in without notifying Jake beforehand, and then came to greet us with her daughter, Sophia.
It's been a while, Kate. We're right nearby. I might be bothering you sometimes, but I look forward to getting along.
Wearing gardening gloves and caught off guard by her unexpected visit, I was bewildered. Jake's displeasure was clear on his face, and he seemed slightly irritated.
Michelle, you could have at least given us a heads up before coming.
Michelle narrowed her eyes slightly. With perfectly groomed hair, she played with a strand and gave Jake an upward glance, smiling.
Hey, can we talk alone for a bit? There are things only siblings can talk about, right?
Jake stared at Michelle for a moment without saying a word, and then it led to him listening to various matters inside the house. I was left feeling confused. So, Sophia's left behind? Seeing her looking bored, I invited her to help plant bulbs in the flower bed with Zoe.
Sorry, Auntie Kate.
Holding the small shovel I handed her, Sophia said this with a slightly sad look on her face. Sophia, for an elementary schooler, had bright brown hair and large eyes. She often dressed stylishly, looking quite like her mom, Michelle, who had long golden hair and a striking appearance. Unlike Zoe and me, who had a calmer look, Sophia wore cheerful, colorful clothes with bright ribbons.
You don't have to apologize. Let's plant these together, okay? When spring comes, we'll have lots of flowers. Yeah, thank you.
Zoe smiled gently and placed a bulb in Sophia's hand. After a moment's thought, Sophia sat on the ground and began digging with the shovel. Once the bulbs were planted in the flower bed, the two of them went home. With a slight, uneasy smile, Jake turned to me and said,
Michelle wants us to watch Sophia tomorrow morning.
Apparently, Michelle, since her divorce, had been under a lot of stress and wanted a break. Jake hadn't gotten all the details though.
My mom and dad spoiled Michelle so much when we were kids. I don't know. She just knows how to get people to help her. I had to put up with it a lot growing up.
And did you just agree to watch her with that good brother smile of yours?
Well, I just couldn't say no.
Well, I'm the one who'll be taking care of her, aren't I? The little brother, still caving to his big sister's demands. Has anything really changed? From that day on, every weekend I wasn't working, Sophia would be dropped off at our house. It was happening so often that I talked to Jake about it, but he took Michelle's side.
Come on. It's tough for her.
I felt a bit frustrated, but I held back too. After all, both their parents had already passed, with Jake and Michelle as each other's only family. I told myself it was right for me to be patient. So, as Sophia started visiting every weekend, I felt our daily routine gradually shifting. I'd prepare breakfast in the morning, glancing at the unchanged flower bed. Feeling a faint unease as our peaceful days slowly lost their color, I began to notice the cause clearly. Jake's attitude had changed since Michelle moved nearby. He'd lost his kindnesses and seemed constantly rushed, a bit colder. Though he works late every night, recently he's been taking his laptop out on his days off too.
I'll go find a quiet spot to work on some projects documents.
We're spending less time together as a family these days. I finally worked up the courage to ask him. Asking this took a lot of bravery on my part. Jake leaves his entire paycheck to me, doesn't smoke or drink, and has no real hobbies. He's always been a kind father who braids Zoe's hair every morning, so if he says he doesn't have time for family, he must really be busy. I didn't know what answer I was hoping for, but I couldn't help but want something that would reassure me.
They've given me a new project at work. I've got more work events to go to. I'm really sorry.
He looked away, his shoulders slumped slightly. In the past, he'd always valued family time despite his limited days off, but now it felt like that time had almost disappeared. With an air of genuine regret, he muttered an apology again.
I'm really sorry.
On weekends, it was as if Michelle was filling in the gaps left in our family time, visiting more frequently with Sophia, wearing her little ribbons.
If you're not going out, you got time, right?
That was her attitude, and she continued to leave Sophia with us more and more. I had no choice but to accept Michelle's whims. But even so, one comfort was seeing Zoe and Sophia playing happily together. I quietly watched them from the living room sofa, where they played right in front of me. The soft sunlight streaming through the window gently illuminated their smiling faces. The two of them sat at the small piano in the corner of the living room, happily pressing the keys.
Sophia, try pressing this white key here.
As Zoe instructed, Sophia's eyes sparkled as she reached out her finger. When a sound played, she smiled joyfully and exclaimed,
I want to do it more.
Zoe smiled proudly and said,
This is a song I learned.
Then she began to play a simple melody with her fingers. Watching them, I felt my heart warm. I recalled when Zoe had started piano lessons at 3 years old. She had been nervous but captivated by the sound of the piano during her first lesson. Now, she was the one teaching Sophia, applying her experience. Seeing her growth was deeply moving.
Now, Sophia, why don't you try playing?
With some hesitation, Sophia placed her fingers on the keys as Zoe encouraged her. As sounds filled the room, Zoe demonstrated.
Here, like this.
Sophia tried to imitate her. Their fingers danced across the keys.
Great job, Sophia. Wow, you're learning so fast.
Sophia laughed bashfully, but seemed to enjoy making sounds at her own pace, little by little. I cherished this moment, grateful to witness their growth. The sound of the piano filled the room, blending with their laughter. I suddenly realized something. For now, there was no shadow of Michelle or the changed demeanor of Jake. I could simply focus on enjoying this peaceful time. The music and laughter from Zoe and Sophia were a source of comfort to me now. As these weekends continued, Sophia grew close to me and began to trust me. At times, she looked up to me almost like a real mother and would often confide her feelings.
Auntie Kate, I'm sorry for always coming over.
Not at all. Zoe seems happy too, and watching you get better at the piano is such a joy. There was no lie in those words. Sophia had a natural talent for the piano. With only a bit of guidance from Zoe and me, her skills improved dramatically. Today, Zoe was away for several hours practicing at her piano class. Sophia, looking a bit lonely, sat in front of the piano, her hands resting on the keys. Carefully pressing each key, it was as if she were trying to convey something with every sound. Sensing a slight sadness in the melody, I walked over, and Sophia looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. What's wrong, Sophia?
I'm sorry, Auntie Kate. There's something I need to apologize for.
My heart fluttered with concern. Sophia was always cheerful and lively in front of Zoe, so what could be bothering her today? As I rubbed her back, I reassured her. It's okay. Then Sophia, through her tears, said to me,
It feels like Mom and Uncle Jake are doing something bad together.
Well, what exactly do you mean by that?
I'm sorry.
Despite feeling both surprised and uneasy, Sophia's sobs became so intense that she couldn't continue speaking. At that moment, I just kept rubbing her back gently. It's okay. Everything's fine. And I didn't bring up the topic again after that. Jake and Michelle doing something bad. It didn't quite make sense to me, so I didn't dwell on it too much. At the time, my mind was filled with thoughts about Zoe's upcoming piano recital. Last month, Zoe's piano teacher had invited her to participate in a recital, her first one since she started piano lessons at 3. For the big day, we even went to a salon for the first time to get her ready. In a rare moment, when Sophia wasn't with us, the three of us went dress shopping together. We got into the car, drove to a large shopping mall, and browsed multiple stores.
Mom, Dad, come on, hurry.
Zoe, usually so calm, was a bit more excited than usual. She kept asking me in the car,
I wonder what kind of dresses they'll have.
"What color do you want, Zoe?"
Light blue. Like the sky.
Without hesitation, Zoe answered. We browsed several stores, searching for a light blue dress that would be perfect for her.
Oh, this one. I want this one.
Pointing at a dress that sparkled under the light, Zoe's eyes shone brightly. We asked a store assistant, and she took it to the fitting room to try it on. When Zoe came out, she looked a bit shy, with a face that tried to hide her overflowing smile. She looked absolutely adorable. Zoe chose that light blue dress, and with a beaming smile, she told Jake and me,
Thank you. I'll do my best at the recital.
Imagining her standing alone on stage in her chosen dress for her piano recital made my eyes misty. But there was no worry. Zoe would be just fine. Her innocent smile was filled with confidence. Back home, as I stood in the kitchen, I looked out the small window at the empty flower bed. I sincerely hoped her piano recital would go well. A few days later, as the big day approached, Zoe was eagerly preparing. But on the weekend right before the recital, that peace was suddenly shattered.
Mom, help.
I was hanging laundry when I heard Zoe's panicked cry. Startled, I dropped the slightly damp towel I was holding onto the floor. I rushed toward the sound of her voice, only to find Zoe crying, while Jake looked down at her. Michelle was also there, having likely dropped by as usual to leave Sophia with us, and in her hand, she clutched a dress as if it were a trophy. That dress. It was the one we'd bought for Zoe's piano recital. Why was Michelle holding it? Feeling puzzled, I asked, "What's wrong, Zoe?" Through her tears, Zoe's voice trembled as she said,
Dad gave my dress to Sophia.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Looking up, I saw Jake avoiding my gaze, looking visibly uncomfortable. What? Jake, what's going on here?
Well, I just thought Sophia should get a chance to wear a dress too.
As I pressed for answers, Jake mumbled, trying to explain himself. Michelle, feigning innocence, held onto the shoulder of the dress, examining its decorations. Just as I was about to say something out of irritation at both Jake's attitude and Michelle's behavior, Sophia tugged hard on Michelle's sleeve.
Mom? Stop it. Give Zoe her dress back.
Why? Your uncle gave it to you as a gift, didn't he? Isn't that right, Jake?
Michelle turned to Jake, who looked slightly flustered and hesitated.
Well, yeah, I suppose.
This can't be happening. That dress was bought just the other day for Zoe. How did it turn into something to be given to Sophia? Sophia stepped away from Michelle and rushed to my side, looking up at me with a pleading, slightly frightened expression.
Mom told Uncle Jake to take Zoe's dress and bring it.
Sophia's voice was desperate as she shouted. As I grasped the meaning of her words, a cold feeling settled in my chest. Michelle smiled calmly, as if this were all perfectly reasonable.
Well, I just wanted Sophia to have the dress to wear too.
To her, it seemed there was nothing wrong with this at all. Ignoring the fact that Zoe was still crying, she gently patted Sophia's head and said,
Look, Sophia, isn't this dress just perfect on you? It really suits your pretty face.
Sophia didn't react, instead looking more confused.
But it's my dress.
Zoe shouted, her voice rising. Michelle glanced at her for a moment.
But look, doesn't it look much brighter and prettier on Sophia?
Michelle laughed mockingly and pressed the dress against Sophia's shoulders. Her tone was full of disdain, directed right at Zoe.
Your face is a little plain. I don't mean that in a bad way, but I think this dress is more suited for Sophia.
Zoe's eyes filled with tears, and seeing this, anger welled up inside me. Michelle, that's really uncalled for.
Okay, do you not like what I'm saying? But this is reality. This dress should be given to the cuter ones, don't you think?
If I responded here, it might escalate into a fight. I turned to look at Jake, and he looked pale and silent.
So, is Zoe crying because she couldn't get the dress after all?
Zoe shook her head.
No, Dad. I'm sad because my dress was taken from me.
Wouldn't you agree that Sophia looks cuter in the dress than Zoe does? Or does Zoe think you're cuter than Sophia? Do you think Sophia is somehow less than you?
Jake, why are you saying it like that?
I can confidently say Sophia is cuter. I want to give cute dresses to cute girls. That's only natural, right? Am I thinking about this the wrong way?
Michelle's tone grew more forceful, as if she had won some decisive victory.
But I don't even want the dress.
I looked quietly at Sophia. She was struggling. She was caught, unable to stop her mom and Jake from going too far.
I just want to play with Zoe.
Michelle's eyes widened in surprise as she responded.
Sophia, what are you saying?
She threw her arms wide theatrically, looking up at the ceiling. What am I even witnessing here?
Wearing a dress is something special. You need to have more confidence. Don't hold back. If someone offers you something, you absolutely take it. Got it?
Michelle shot a glare at Jake. Why can't Jake ever stand up to her? As pathetic as it felt to be disappointed in my own husband, Jake's next words, even under Michelle's influence, were utterly unforgivable.
It's true. Sophia does look better in that dress than Zoe does.
The moment he said that, looking down at Zoe, time stopped for me. His voice echoed as though he had poured ice-cold water over my entire being. Zoe, whom I had loved since her baby years, my dearest treasure, the most beautiful and cherished person in my world. To insult her was to insult me. Zoe's little face turned into a sorrowful expression. Thank you for everything up until now. I took Zoe's hand and said this blankly, beginning to head upstairs to pack. Anger and sadness swirled within me. Zoe, realizing my determination, gave a small nod and prepared herself as well, glancing back at Jake.
Goodbye, Dad.
With that, we began making preparations to leave together. As we walked out of the house, Michelle's laughter echoed behind us. But neither Zoe nor I stopped. We walked away without looking back, determined to step into a new future. It hadn't even been 10 minutes as we walked toward the station when my phone rang. Jake's name on the screen. My heart pounded. "It's your dad," I told Zoe before answering. "Hello."
What the hell is going on?
Jake's angry voice burst from the speaker, his tone filled with clear distress and rage. For a moment, I was speechless, trying to process the situation, imagining him on the other end, raking his hands through his hair in frustration.
Right after you left, my boss called to tell me I've been fired. What's going on, Kate?
As his words hit me, I struggled to make sense of it all. Fired? Why? And why now? But why?
Just after you walked out, my boss called saying I'm terminated. Do you know anything about this?
His accusatory question hung heavily in my mind. I recalled the conversation I had with Sophia a few days ago, her solemn face when she confided in me.
It feels like Mom and Uncle Jake are doing something bad together.
At that moment, I had suspected Jake and Michelle were involved in something shady. Anxious and uncertain, I had reached out to a private investigator, despite the strain it put on my savings. I felt that asking Jake directly wouldn't get me any real answers. He always took Michelle's side, and I'd likely just be brushed off. It seemed more effective to investigate quietly and find out what secrets they might be hiding. I was scared and nervous. Were they involved in something illegal? I worried about that until I finally received the results from the investigator. And just days ago, the investigator revealed the truth. Jake had been having an affair. But he'd chosen the wrong person to betray me with.
The investigator reported it to the company. Who else would order an investigation on me, huh? You knew, didn't you? You knew who I was involved with.
Yes, Jake had been unfaithful. Moreover, it turned out to be an affair on both sides. His partner in the affair also had a family. To make matters worse, the woman was the daughter of the CEO of one of Jake's company's clients, and I knew that if this scandal came to light, it would harm the company as well. I used my savings to hire a detective. You weren't busy with work. You were lying and cheating on me, weren't you? I sensed a dead silence on Jake's end. My words must have hit him deeply, making him realize the gravity of his actions. I shifted the phone in my hand and began explaining the complicated situation. Initially, I hadn't suspected an affair. I just couldn't shake the unease after what Sophia had told me and wanted to clear my mind. When the investigation revealed his affair, I didn't know what to do. I reached out to the husband of Jake's affair partner, explaining the situation, and he was furious. He insisted on sending the investigation report to Jake's company. I never imagined that today, right after I left the house, it would reach your company. My voice trembled. Everything was spiraling out of control. Not only was his affair wrecking both families, but it was also destroying Jake's career. I was witnessing the lives of so many people unraveling due to my actions.
Because of you, I've lost everything. Don't think this ends here.
This isn't my fault. You chose this path yourself. As I retorted, a mix of anger and sadness stirred inside me, shaken by the harsh words he was spewing at me through the phone. With the cold wind brushing my cheeks, Zoe and I hurried down the path to the station. It felt like winter was just around the corner, the air growing colder. I held my phone, still connected to Jake, who had fallen silent, and could hear the faint sounds of him moving. Most likely, he didn't want Michelle to overhear what he was about to say, so he kept quiet.
Kate, listen, it's all my sister's fault.
Michelle's fault? Why isn't this your responsibility? You're the one who had the affair.
Actually,
I replied calmly, prompting Jake to lower his voice, clearly preparing for a confession. Once we passed through the station gates, I sat on a bench and handed Zoe some change, gesturing for her to get a drink. She nodded and walked toward the vending machines, contemplating her choice.
just before Michelle moved nearby, I offered to help her move as a friendly gesture. That's when I met one of her friends. And as I helped them organize the apartment, we hit it off.
So, her friend had that flashy style that caught your eye, huh? A cold fury rose within me. I couldn't just sit and listen as Jake described how his affair began. The investigation had already provided me with the details. The woman's name, her face, where they'd been together. Imagining him strolling through town with that woman, even though I'd seen her photo, made me sick to my stomach. My mind was already leaning toward our ending. And the incident with the dress had been the final straw.
Michelle told me you were the one having an affair, Kate.
Jake's voice quivered. Me? Having an affair? Every weekday, I worked part-time as a dressmaker, spending my weekends at home. The workplace was mostly women, with few men around. Some days, I didn't talk to any men other than Jake.
I was so shaken. I wanted to trust you, but I couldn't muster the courage to ask, and my doubts wouldn't go away.
So, you're saying that's why you cheated?
I got invited out for a drink. Normally, I would have said no. But at that time, I thought, if you're enjoying yourself with someone else, then why shouldn't I?
Jake tried to explain, claiming it was supposed to be just a night out. He went on to explain, saying he regretted letting the atmosphere get to him and making a terrible mistake.
I was set up by Michelle. She used it against me to manipulate me, asking for money and trying to control me.
I couldn't stand Jake's attempts to blame his actions on someone else. I didn't know why Michelle would lie to Jake, telling him I was unfaithful. I could sympathize with the pain he went through from that lie. But crossing the line was his own choice, no matter the reasons. He had to take responsibility for that. Jake's voice broke as he pleaded,
I'm the victim here. Forgive me. I'll change my mind.
"The only one who sees themselves as a victim is you." I said this calmly, standing up from the bench. Zoe, having finished her juice, came over to my side. The sky was overcast, and the cold air hinted at the arrival of winter. An announcement about the approaching train broke the silence, and a few people leaned forward in anticipation. "The original cause lies with you. You're the one who chose to prioritize your affair and Michelle over your family."
Kate, please, just one more chance.
Desperation colored Jake's voice. I wanted him to stop sounding so pathetic.
Are you really going to leave me? What about Zoe? Won't she be lonely? Am I never going to braid her hair again? Doesn't she need me?
A few pigeons rested quietly in the corner of the platform. Sensing the incoming train, they suddenly flew away, their wings flapping. As a calm silence returned, I replied, You're incredibly cowardly.
Isn't Zoe nearby? Please, let her hear me. Doesn't she want me around? Isn't she wearing that cute braid today? Could you do that for her?
The train approached from the left. As it passed the yellow safety line, it slowed to a stop. Watching the passengers disembark, Zoe stepped onto the train before me. Then, turning back, she reached up and undid her braid, shaking her head to loosen the curls left behind. She extended her hand to me, saying,
Mom, let's get on.
Zoe, your braid.
I always hated it. Waiting every morning for him to finish was annoying. I feel better now.
Though I knew it wasn't her true feeling, I understood that it was her way of being kind to me. Taking a step forward, I boarded the train. Since talking on the phone isn't allowed, I took the phone away from my ear. Goodbye, Jake. Walk the path you chose. With my own actions, I ended our life together. Everything has disappeared. Jake's kind face, his voice, his feelings, all gone.
Mom.
Zoe took my hand. A gentle breeze flowed through the still open doors of the train, slightly lifting her hair, forcing a smile to hide my anxiety from her. I realized it wasn't just for her. I had to look forward for myself too. Later, I arranged to meet Michelle. Not out of sympathy for Jake, but because I had always wanted to confront her directly, knowing she might be the mastermind behind it all. I knew I'd regret it if I didn't. Sitting on a park bench, I waited nervously. Soon, Michelle appeared, dressed in her usual flashy attire, exuding confidence as always.
Why did you call me out here?
I have something to discuss with you. I tried to speak firmly, ready to release the frustrations that had been building up inside me.
Oh, here to blame me again?
Michelle smirked, covering her mouth, and then burst into exaggerated laughter.
If Jake cheated on you, that's hardly my fault.
I can't forgive you for lying to Jake and destroying our family.
Are you blaming me just to cover your own shortcomings? Jake's affair was the result of your neglect.
Michelle's words were intended to provoke me. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure.
Hiring a private investigator to dig into his affair, you practically ruined your own life.
I also submitted the investigation results to the local authorities. Michelle tilted her head slightly, not understanding. The sky was darkening, with rain imminent.
Authorities? What are you talking about?
Along with Jake's investigation, I also had you investigated, Michelle. Her eyes widened. I had hired the detective to investigate not only Jake, but also Michelle. After all, Sophia had told me.
Mom and Uncle Jake are doing something bad.
Michelle's actions hadn't seemed suspicious. Despite being a single mother, she likely had a boyfriend. Nothing unusual about that. However, this boyfriend was visiting her place so often it was practically cohabitation. Did you know? To qualify for single mother support, certain conditions need to be met. After receiving the detective's report, I submitted it to the appropriate authorities. She was practically living with a man who, though an ordinary worker, was likely financially supporting her. Additionally, she not only left Sophia with me, but also frequently left her alone at the apartment at night, indulging in a fixation with hosts. Based on this information, they might conduct an investigation. If you've been receiving benefits under false pretenses, you might be asked to pay it all back. Michelle's face turned pale. At that moment, I made a decision. I would no longer let this woman control my life. The heavy, dark clouds above were on the verge of releasing rain. I don't want anything to do with you anymore. Don't ruin my life. I stood up, looking at Michelle as she sat there, stunned. The rain began to fall in droplets. I took a folding umbrella from my bag and handed it to her. Take it or you'll catch a cold. I walked away, leaving Michelle on the bench, staring blankly. My heart wasn't entirely at ease. But this was the end of my conflict with Michelle. I resolved to take this first step toward reclaiming my own happiness. A few months passed, and as winter began to ease, I prepared for a fresh start. The divorce with Jake, initially met with his resistance, gradually proceeded as he grew unnaturally quiet, almost as if accepting his choice. I assumed he had plans to marry his affair partner and perhaps hoped for an advantageous outcome. But those hopes didn't pan out. His affair partner, it turned out, wasn't as serious about him as he'd thought. After our divorce, Jake lost his jobs, family, and girlfriend. Michelle, too, was found to have squandered the child support she received from her ex-husband on host club expenses, along with the money Jake had given her. On top of that, she had been dating multiple men simultaneously. Due to the investigation by the authorities, she was now being asked to repay the financial aid she had received unlawfully. Frankly, both siblings were the worst. What remained on my mind, though, was Sophia. I was concerned about her living situation with Michelle, but it seemed that her father had decided to take custody of her. Apparently, Michelle had been reported for neglect after leaving Sophia home alone frequently, and her ex-husband, upon learning of the situation, had stepped up to take her in. Knowing Sophia's circumstances, I didn't feel sadness. Because
I'm here.
Sophia's cheerful voice echoed at the entrance. Zoe and I had moved to a new place, which happened to be close to where Sophia now lived with her father. Zoe and Sophia had always been close cousins, and even though Jake and I were divorced, I had no intention of tearing apart their bond. Zoe had started taking piano lessons again in her new school, and Sophia had also become interested in piano. They now encouraged and challenged each other to improve. As for myself, I had found a full-time position at a different location of the sewing company where I'd previously worked part-time. I resolved to work not only for my family, but also for my own dreams. A quiet hope began to grow within me. Zoe and Sophia might perform a piano piece wearing dresses I'd sewn for them. Looking out of the window in my new kitchen, I caught a glimpse of the slightly warmer spring scenery outside. My mind suddenly thought of the tulips I planted in the house where I lived with Jake last winter. I wondered if those bulbs had blossomed, but I'd never know. In the peaceful living room, I set up my sewing machine, finding comfort in the sound of the needle stitching fabric. Soft light streamed in from the window, enveloping the room in warmth, and I looked up. In the corner of the room, Sophia sat attentively at the old piano.
I can almost play this song now, Zoe. Just listen to it for a minute.
Okay. You'll try it.
Sophia's fingers touched the keys and sound filled the room. The note started a bit awkwardly, but soon a melody began to emerge. It was a part of Bach's Minuet. Her right hand glided lightly over the keys, bringing out the melody, while her fingers moved elegantly across the keyboard, with occasional support from her left hand providing the harmony. She maintained the balance beautifully.
Wow! You've gotten so good with just a little practice,
Zoe said, her voice filled with excitement. Sophia blushed a bit, continuing to play with a focused expression. Her fingers bounced to the rhythm, moving smoothly, as though she was bringing the music from within her heart to life. As I continued working on the sewing machine, I watched Sophia's serious expression and felt warmth spread through me. Time passed with the music, deepening the bond between them.
Oh! There's going to be a piano recital soon. Mom, that's what this flyer is for.
Sophia's fingers danced over the keys, her face lighting up as she immersed herself in the music. Zoe handed me a paper with details about the recital. The location, a community hall near a national park.
Our teacher said there's a park near the venue with tons of blooming tulips.
I paused the sewing machine and looked at Zoe. I can no longer check if the tulips I planted have bloomed. But I can be here, watching this child, watching Zoe's future so closely. I can hold her hand and walk forward with her. I can watch Zoe's smile and Sophia's growth. That is a truly joyful thing. Yes, that sounds very exciting. In my heart, a quiet hope for the arrival of spring had indeed begun to bloom.